All right, hello everyone, my name is Jason Giardino. I represent a paper called Foucault, Heterotopias as Play Spaces. I wrote this paper in conjunction with Tim Hutchings, who many of you probably know. Tim has done academic presentations before. He's one of our respected game designers. I am not. I'm definitely riding on his coattails, but Tim is proud, so I get to do it instead. I'm a non-academic. I do have an undergraduate in philosophy from the University of Pennsylvania. My master's is in computer science. I've been playing tabletop for almost 3 decades, and LARP very much for the past year. And I'm super excited to be here, especially with so many amazing academics here. So I want to dive right in.
If that's not working, I can.
Okay, go ahead. I can move to the next slide. All right. So in this paper, I'm going to be talking about Michel Foucault, French philosopher. He had this concept of heterotopias. He wanted to try to essentially define a part of utopia that was real. And heterotopians are known for having a sense of otherness to them. And we wanted to apply this to LARP and play spaces as a useful tool. So hopefully by the end of this you'll see it. We have a framework that will help designers and players think about their play spaces a little differently. Unlike so many of the amazing papers here, I don't have a lot of data. We started a research path that did that, but we found that finding the terms was so extensive that this is a philosophy paper, actually. This is we're defining terms. We're going to have some future works I think we're going to be examining from a more of a data survey perspective. But this is more about defining terms, giving us some new terminology. It's nice thing about not being an academic, I get to cheat a little and just sit in a room and think lofty thoughts, so hopefully they'll be helpful for you. So let's just dive right in. 1967, Michel Foucault gave a lecture to a group of architects. And he was trying to define this thing. The word heterotopia had been around, but Foucault was the one really to define it. And he came up with 6 principles of what makes a heterotopia. So we have utopia. Utopia is an idea. It's in the clouds. It doesn't exist. Heterotopia is real. It's in our real world. It's a real space. But it's sort of a fully realized utopia in a micro sense. And he identified 6 principles of what makes a heterotopia. The first is that all cultures have heterotopias, and they're most likely heterotopias of crisis or heterotopias of deviation. By crisis, he doesn't mean it really in a panic sense. He means it as adolescents, the elderly, people who are in a state of being that's a little different than what the normal adult state. An example of a heterotopia of crisis is a 19th century boarding school. Deviation means just that, those who deviate from society. It could be a prison, it could be a retirement home, which borders on crisis. It could be something like a psychiatric hospital. It's a space for those who are just deviating from society, and these are in every society. The second principle is that heterotopias are a reflection of the society that they exist in. They have a function in society. The example that Foucault gives is a cemetery, actually. There's a specific function. That function can evolve over time. Cemeteries used to be in cities. Now they're more on the outskirts of cities as our perspectives of death changed during the 20th century. The third principle is that heterotopias bring together multiple real spaces. The cinema is an example of this. It's a heterotopia that it's this other space, has a function, 3-dimensional seats in an auditorium, 2-dimensional screen, different real spaces are brought together into a single space. It's a key feature of heterotopias. The fourth principle is that heterotopias are linked to particular slices of time. Time flows a little differently in heterotopias than your day-to-day life. Example being the festival, an empty field. People come in, they set the festival. Not only do you have slices of time in terms of it's a limited time there, but when you go in, if you've ever been at a carnival, time's not the same. It flows a little differently. And then ends and it's an empty field again. The fifth principle is that heterotopias have systems for entering and exiting the space. There's some ritual involved with heterotopia. Foucault's example is a sauna, that there's a purification ritual. You usually have to shower before you go into a sauna. And finally, there are heterotopias can serve as a space of illusions or spaces of compensation. A compensation notion is not as common, but he gives the example of a New World colony. Those seeking religious freedom want to compensate and find a new space for that. Illusion is going to be a bit more what we're talking about in LARP. And a brothel is a fantastic example of that. We're creating an illusion for the customers of the brothel that are going in. So with that, we want to talk about play spaces now. Before I go into that, actually, I want to give Foucault's ultimate example, a little note from my very first slide, of a cruise ship. For Foucault, the boat was a heterotopia par excellence. It was, it served all the functions extremely well. If you've ever been on a cruise ship, you'll see how it fits all these rituals. Time flows differently. There's a specific ritual for getting on and off. There's a function both of entertainment and transportation. It is a world in and of itself. So if anyone ever asks you what Heterotopia is, just tell them cruise ship, and they will get it. So let's talk about play spaces. We define play space just as that merging of the imaginary, the rules, the unreal of your play with the physical space that you're in. Look at the room we're in right now. Right now it's not a play space. Last night there was a game here. In that moment it wasn't. So it's a combination of these walls and those rules being played that made the play space. A D&D game at the kitchen table, a pickup game of soccer or football in the park. These are play spaces. And we want to talk a bit about how play spaces become heterotopias. And there was one really good paper about this that gave us some direction. It came out just last November by Devin Wilson about Euro games, board games as heterotopias. Something you might not think about at first. But he came up with this term we loved called the Foucauldian mirror test. This is a term that gave us, yeah, I did do it first. This gives us a term where, if you're just playing a board game, you're not really entering otherness. But for him, he said, what if I have this meaningful self-reflection during the game? And for his example was, he's an ethical vegan, and the Castle of Burgundy has a mechanic where you bring animals onto your estate, not to slaughter or eat them, they're just victory points. And for him, he had this vision of I'm rescuing these animals, and there was this moment of self-reflection. And for his conclusion was, when I'm entering these moments, yes, I can count a board game as a heterotopia. And it's really helpful to think about, actually, and something that will carry over. So what we're going to do is we're going to do two really extreme examples of a game that isn't a heterotopia and a game that is to help crystallize these thoughts. And so our first question is D&D. Is Dungeons & Dragons a heterotopia? Well, when we first throw it against its principles, it's looking pretty good. First principle, it's a deviant behavior. We don't mean that in a prerogative way. We just mean that, having rules about how you interact with each other is deviant from how you normally interact in day-to-day society. Thirdly, you'll note I skipped 2, spoiler alert. Thirdly, it combines multiple spaces into one space. You lay out a map, you have miniatures. At the same time, you're at your kitchen table. You can still get and get sodas. There's more than one thing going on in terms of how spaces are brought into D&D. Fourth, it's linked to slices of time. Not only the Thursday night that you get together to play your game, specific time, but it's a game that actually has initiative, combat, 5-second rounds. There's time related to D&D. There's definitely a ritual to enter. You can't just instantly sit down and start playing. You have to create a character. You have to be invited. You have to have an understanding of the rules, at least on a basic level. And it also definitely seeks to create a space of an illusion. Creating an illusion of being fantasy heroes in a fantasy world. It's that second principle, though, that we struggle with a bit. That does it have a function in the society at large? Well, in a very general sense, of course. It's a game. Games have function. It's entertainment. So we don't, that's function to be a very broad word. For Foucault and for us, we want to give function a slightly higher meaning in terms of how that applies. Now that said, if you apply that Foucauldian mirror test, yes, of course you can have D&D games that are heterotopias. If you've ever been in a game where you're also your characters get to talk about the ethical treatment of kobolds, right? That's definitely probably a higher level function. But this is not a prerogative term at all. Games are awesome. They do not have to be heterotopias to be awesome. This is just a framing device that we have. This is Tim's line, it's one of my favorite. D&D remains blissfully ignorant of the space which hosts it. It's just one of those things where you don't quite necessarily have that sense of truly entering someplace else, that immersion sense. Let's jump to another example that most of you are probably very familiar with that we definitely think is heterotopia, and that is Just a Little LARP. Very, very, very famous, popular LARP. In case you don't know about a 5-day LARP about the AIDS crisis in the early 1980s New York and the gay communities. Without reiterating the principle, it positively means all 6. This is another space. But coming to that second principle that we think D&D misses, the designers were explicit in their function. They wanted to say that, they want their players to experience things of desire, friendship, fear of death. this is the kind of function that we're more interested in terms of heterotopias. There was intent here. There was intent on how the function of this game was going to work. The designers positively want to bring their players into another space. And boy, did they ever. There was a fantastic collection of player experiences. And in terms of the otherness, there were some examples of one player who had to write a letter to their character as if they were alive today. There was an example of a female player needing extensive time to de-roll. She actually brought the dress with her, high heels, intentionally had to change, remember that she was female and not male. Real powerful experience there. Some players had panic attacks while they de-roll. I mean, this is significant in terms of, was that you? So, yes, Sarah indicating that as well. I mean, this is a positive sense of otherness, this heterotopia. So, what does it all mean? Is it helpful? Well, we think it is. We think that as a designer, if there's an opportunity to look at your game as you're designing it and want to create this sense of otherness, you can look at these 6 principles. You can look at, am I doing this? Am I going along with these 6 principles? Am I succeeding in creating this other space? If you're already there, it's an opportunity for you to take some care, to think about what's going to happen to your players as you bring them in the space, out of the space. What is your intent? What is your function? What is your ritual? Are you seeking to create illusion? Are you seeking to create a crisis, deviation? We think Foucault created something really powerful here that can help game designers, and we're really excited about actually looking at this in the future. Now that we've had some time to define this, we think we're going to do some future studies where we want to look at a bunch of lives. We want to do interviews, we want to talk to people, we want to see if this is a tool that can become helpful in the future, and we're really excited about our future studies. So I hope this is helpful as well, and I look forward to any of your questions. Thank you so much.